All right, so the 2024 NHL Trade Deadline has wrapped up, and the Jets have made all their moves, all two of them from actual deadline day, but three overall in terms of the in general trade deadline time. And I gotta say, for me, I'm pretty impressed with what Kevin Cheveldayoff has been able to add to this team, to a team that has been one of the best teams in the NHL this year, and adding a few pieces that could maybe turn this team into a Stanley Cup contender. So in today's video, we're going to go over the two trades that happened today at deadline day, as well as all three trades that Kevin Cheveldayoff made, and then look at a projected fully healthy Winnipeg Jets lineup and determine whether this team has what it takes to compete in the Western Conference and compete for the Stanley Cup. So we'll get into that and a bit more in this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get started with the rest of the video, however, I'd just like to remind you guys to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new around here. Leaving likes on these videos really helps them perform better, and the YouTube algorithm helps this channel grow. So if you want to see this channel grow, again, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you do not miss another video. All right, so let's start by going over what Kevin Cheveldayoff did today, and we'll start with the smaller deal and then we'll get into the bigger deal that happened today. So we'll start with Winnipeg acquiring Colin Miller from the New Jersey Devils in exchange for a 2026 fourth round pick. And just looking quickly at Colin Miller's stats this year, in 41 games he has 4 goals and 4 assists for 8 points and a +10 plus-minus rating. And looking at his JFresh hockey card on Twitter here, pretty solid bottom pairing depth right-handed defenseman, which is something that I believe the Jets have been looking for, because their answer this year so far has been Nate Schmidt and Logan Stanley. I feel like Cheveldayoff was looking for a better solution to that part of their defense. Colin Miller should be answering that question and should be filling that hole quite well. He's been playing pretty well on a New Jersey team that has struggled this year, especially under Lindy Ruff's system, who just got fired, to now moving to a defensively minded system in Winnipeg with Rick Bowness. And I'm sure Rick Bowness is going to put Colin Miller in the best situation possible for him to succeed. So pretty good pickup. Would I have liked to see maybe a top 4 guy, or maybe someone that can push his way into the top 4? Probably. That would have been nice to see at least, but just looking at the defensive core, it's pretty solid already, and barring an injury, it should be just fine. And Colin Miller will be a pretty good addition to that bottom pairing with most likely Dylan Sandberg. So not much really to talk about with that trade. Now we're going to move on to the big deal that Kevin Cheveldayoff made, one of the bigger deals on deadline day, and that is Winnipeg acquiring Tyler Toffoli at a 50% salary retention for New Jersey for a 2025 second round pick and a 2024 third round pick. And just looking at Tyler Toffoli's stats in 61 games this year, he's put up 26 goals and 18 assists for 44 points. He's a -15 this year. And now looking at his JFresh hockey card, JFresh says Tyler Toffoli is a veteran top 6 winger who loves to shoot the puck and uses high hockey IQ to get to dangerous areas and score. Not a fast skater, but nonetheless effective off the rush. Other aspects of his game see a bit context dependent. He's on the last year of his deal, and I might as well say now as well, Colin Miller also on the last year of his deal. These guys will both be UFAs at the end of the season. So the Jets basically here acquiring a right wing goal scorer, something that they have been lacking in their lineup this year. They've looked for solutions, but outside of Gabriel Velarde and maybe sometimes Nikolai Ehlers, they haven't really found a solid solution to that spot in their lineup. And here they're giving up 2 draft picks, one being a second round pick in 2025, so not too much to worry about right now, and a 2024 third round pick, which, I mean, it's going to hurt a little bit, but it's also a third round pick. But only giving up 2 assets for a bona fide at least 20 goal scorer in the NHL, if not a 25, sometimes 30 goal scorer in Tyler Toffoli. It's a pretty nice package to be giving up instead of giving up what could be like a first round pick and more. Overall, very good trade from Cheveldayoff. Once again, he only gives up 2 assets, nothing off the roster, no prospects that they already have, just futures. And they get Tyler Toffoli, who is going to help this team score, is probably going to help that second power play unit quite a bit, and is going to provide some depth scoring in the playoffs, something that the Jets, I believe, have needed this year. Just some extra scoring behind guys like Kyle Connor, Velarde, Niederreiter. So overall, thumbs up on that trade, thumbs up on the Colin Miller trade. I thought they were both great moves from Cheveldayoff. So now zooming out, let's look at these trades as a whole. These 2 trades, along with the Sean Monahan trade made about a month ago at this point. So we've got Sean Monahan, Tyler Toffoli, and Colin Miller, and out, the Jets gave up their 2024 first-round pick and third-round pick, their 2025 second-round pick, their 4th-round pick in 2026, and a conditional 3rd-round pick in 2027, that being part of the Sean Monahan trade, and giving up a 1st, a 2nd, 2 3rds, and a 4th. That's not too bad, and especially you don't have to give up anyone off of your current roster or any of your current prospects like McGroarty or Lucius or Lambert, because I didn't really want them to give up any of their current prospects, but that was kind of floating around in terms of what the Jets would need to give up for some impactful players. And in the end, they just ended up giving up draft picks, and they didn't have to give anyone on their roster up or any of their young prospects, which I think is a great move from Cheveldayoff. From there, let's look at their draft pick situation, because all that they gave up was draft picks. So the Jets are left with 5 picks in the 2024 draft. That's not including their first. Then they have Montreal's second, and they don't have a 3rd-round pick. In 2025, they have 5 picks. They don't have a first or a 4th. And in 2026, they have 6 picks with no 4th-round pick. So no first in the next 2 drafts does sting a little bit, I will say, but if you're trying to go all in, like Kevin Cheveldayoff said at today's press conference, that 1st-round pick or those 2 first-round picks that you're missing for the next 2 years should hopefully not be the end of the world. But in terms of their future, they're not necessarily screwed, and even then, I kind of trust Cheveldayoff's draft record, because he's been able to draft guys that have been able to make an impact in the NHL, especially in the later rounds. So I don't have a problem with it necessarily. So now let's get into what the projected lineup looks like for this team going into the playoffs, going into post-deadline games. For their forward core, you've still got Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde as your top line, because they've been playing really well. On that second line, you've got Ehlers, Monahan, and now Tyler Toffoli slots into that second line right wing spot. Third line, you've got Iafallo, Lowry, Niederreiter. And then on the 4th line, I right now have Perfetti, Nemesnikov, and Appleton, but I've seen some guys have Perfetti out of the lineup going forward. I've seen guys like Gustafsson still sneak in, Barron still sneak in, so there's a lot of moving pieces, especially for that 4th line. But this is how I have it, and it could change, but I think the main things here are Toffoli on that second line right wing spot, and Niederreiter moving down to the 3rd line, and then the 4th line, you can do whatever you want with that. Defense, nothing really changes. You've still got Morrissey and DeMello, Dillon and Pionk, and then Sandberg, and I have Colin Miller on that 3rd pairing right D spot, which means your extra defensemen are Logan Stanley and Nate Schmidt. And of course, they didn't make any changes in net, so they still have Hellebuck, they still have Brossoit. So looking at this lineup, what do the Jets add after this deadline? Well, I believe they added a pretty solid second line center in Sean Monahan about a month ago, and he's fitting quite well into the lineup. They also add a very solid goal scorer in Tyler Toffoli, a guy who can perform in the playoffs and has Stanley Cup experience as well. And those additions push down guys like Lowry, guys like Niederreiter, guys like Perfetti, guys like Nemesnikov, who, when guys have gotten injured, he's filled into that top 6. But you've got a top 6 that can definitely score, a 3rd line that also has some scoring there with guys like Niederreiter. And then the 4th line, you can do a bunch of different combinations. You can go with size and put in a guy like Gustafsson. You can put in Kupari. You could put in Barron as well if you want to talk about size. And these are all lines that can score, that can contribute offensively, which I think is something that you want going into the playoffs. And then in terms of their defense, they have a number 1 defenseman in Josh Morrissey. He's proven that last year wasn't a fluke. He can be a number 1 guy for Winnipeg going forward. You still have an overall pretty solid top four in DeMello, Dillon, and Pionk, along with Josh Morrissey. And then you've got Dylan Sandberg, who's been pretty solid on that bottom pairing all season, and who can really grow into that shutdown role. And Colin Miller, who's consistent. He's not necessarily going to be a guy that wows you every night, but he's consistent. He plays his role very well, and he's going to be very solid on that bottom pairing. And that takes guys like Nate Schmidt, who people aren't the biggest fan of, out of the everyday lineup, and Logan Stanley, another guy that people may have some problems with, out of the everyday lineup. And then in net, you still have the best goaltender in the world. Don't fight me on it. He is the best goaltender in the world, Connor Hellebuyck, and Laurent Brossoit, who's been a solid backup. If Hellebuyck gets injured, he did show in the playoffs last year behind Vegas when Winnipeg lost to Vegas, that he can at least stop some pucks in a playoff situation, in some elimination games as well. He can come up big. So if Hellebuyck does end up getting injured, Brossoit has shown that he can fill into that role. So the one thing I would say about this lineup is depth. There's a lot of depth here. There's a lot of scoring that can be done here, but also these are guys that can play into a system and can play a role and play it very well. This lineup is just deep. And if you watched the TSN Trade Center broadcast, they were really high on the Jets after today, which I'm not too sure how I feel about that, saying that this team could compete for a Stanley Cup. I think Craig Button had them going to the Stanley Cup final. And me personally, I'm not going to get that high on this team just because last year proved that I can't. I really can't, because I was really high on last year's team, and then it came crumbling down, and they lost in 5 games to Vegas. So this team, they still have some games left to be played. They still have tough competition in their own division as well as in their own conference. It wouldn't be easy, but I will say that the Jets do look a lot more primed for playoff competition today than they did yesterday or a month ago. So let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the Jets post-trade deadline? Do you think this team has what it takes to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference? Do you think they have what it takes to make it to, I'll say, the Western Conference final? And do you think they have what it takes to make it to a Stanley Cup final for the first time in Jets 2.0 history, 1.0 history, as well as this franchise, including the Thrashers, history? Let me know in the comment section below, but for now, that is it for this one. I did hope you enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.